You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Greetings, this is Reverend Paul, and this is Studio Chojin Raw. I hope everybody's well, I hope everybody's safe, and thank you for clicking on this video. Before we get to today's topic, I think I should probably address some of the controversy that happened after I uploaded last week's video. I had some people who took issue with the fact that I declared Your Name was the best anime of the 2010s. People were saying to me, well, you know, the characters in Your Name are not very deep, and this anime has much deeper characters, and how can you say Your Name is better than that? And it's like, look, the thing that matters to me is not the depth of character. It has nothing to do with how deep the character is, or how complicated the storyline is, or how many plot lines they're weaving in. To me, it has to do with revealing a universal truth. And that observation that Your Name makes about the human condition, that idea of missing something in your life and trying to find that thing that completes you, I think that was very beautifully told. And it was very relatable. At least it was to me. Maybe you feel differently, but for me, those are the things that matter. Connecting with a piece of work, connecting with a work of art on an emotional level, when it reaches down and connects with your soul, which is why in my Your Name video, I brought up Yngwie Malmsteen. If you don't play guitar or you're not familiar with guitar players, I apologize. I'm a guitar player, so a lot of my brain works in guitar player metaphors. But Yngwie Malmsteen is a guitar player, and he is technically very impressive. He has these very technically impressive, complicated guitar solos that, to me, feel hollow. They feel soulless. Whereas somebody like Buckethead, who also is very technically proficient in his own right, Buckethead plays every note with feeling and emotion. And listening to these two players side by side, it's a real lesson in how to make the most out of the notes you're playing. So for me, in regards to Your Name, it has nothing to do with how deep the characters are. It has to do with the way the characters are used and the statement the film is making with the way it uses those characters. And for me, there really isn't any other anime in the 2010s that compares. Except for maybe Madoka Magica. Madoka Magica, for a while, was my favorite anime of the 2010s. And now, like, look, to be completely fucking honest, have I seen every single anime that came out in the 2010s? No. But these are my opinions based on what I've seen. You know, Madoka Magica and Your Name, I think, are the best animes to come out of the 2010s. But I'm also a fucking weirdo. But I digress. There were also people who said to me, you know, I'm really surprised that you like Your Name. I thought you were somebody who was into like ultra violence and like titty animes. I didn't think you'd like, you know, a love story. And it's like, yeah, look, I love ultra violent titty animes, and I like, you know, moving love stories too. I mean, you can like both of these things. You don't have to like one or the other. I like Urusuke Doji. I think that movie is awesome. And I like Your Name. I think that movie's awesome too. Both these things are awesome. They're very different. I like death metal and I like pop music. These things can coexist in your life. You don't have to pick one or the other. You know, unless you're obsessed with keeping up appearances and what people think about you, and you feel like you have an image you have to protect. If you want to be one of those fucking fake assholes, you know, who has to pretend not to like things they like or pretend to like things they don't like because they want to project a certain kind of image, fine, be that person. I'd rather just be honest and tell you what I like and don't like. I don't give a shit about keeping up appearances. I'm just interested in telling the truth. So without any further delay, let's get to the topic of today's video. Weathering with You was released in 2019 and pretty much has the same creative team as Your Name. It was directed by Makoto Shinkai, character designs were done by Masayoshi Tanaka, and once again Radwimps provided the music. The story of Weathering with You is about a boy named Hodaka who runs away from home and sets out to live in Tokyo. And in Tokyo, he has a hard time. He's trying to get by. He finally meets up with this dude named Sugi and his niece Natsumi, who run a small like tabloid newspaper magazine, and he works for them. And you know, through the course of his daily life, he then runs into this girl named Hina, who has the ability to control the weather, which is important because Tokyo at this point is experiencing nonstop rain. Tokyo is basically being flooded by rain, and Hina has the power to stop the rain and bring sunshine to the city. Right off the bat, there are a lot of similarities similarities between Weathering with You and Your Name. The first of which being that our central characters are these kind of star-crossed lovers, I guess, for lack of a better term. Hina and Hodoka are basically our Mitsuha and Taki. And like Your Name, I think there are a couple of ways you can interpret the movie. The first way I think you can look at the movie is basically as sort of a metaphor for kind of like naive, passionate teenage love. Hodoka and Hina are basically living in Tokyo and they're both struggling. And they kind of have shitty lives and they're trying to do their best to get by, but at the end of the day, they have each other. Hodoka kind of feels like, all of their problems can be solved if they just stay together. It's also made very clear in the story that Hina and the weather are connected. So, obviously when you're looking at the story literally, Hina has the ability to stop the rain. But if we want to look at the film on a metaphorical level, the rain represents sadness. So we have Hodoka, who is living a shitty life. He ran away from home to escape the kind of shitty life he was living there. He had dreams of starting over in the big city, and his life is pretty fucked up in Tokyo as well. And, Hina comes and brings sunshine into his life, figuratively and literally. It's that kind of naive teenage mentality of like, all you need is love. All we need is each other. It doesn't matter if our lives are fucked up. As long as we have each other, we can kind of get through all these problems in the world. And even the rain can be looked at as a metaphor for Hina's life as well. The movie also touches upon the destructiveness of passionate, naive love. And we get a sense of that with the scene where the police visit Sugi. Basically what happens is Hodoka ran away from home, and so his parents put out a missing persons report on him, so the police are trying to find him. And so then there's one scene where one of the police officers goes to interview Sugi, Hodoka's boss, and he talks about, Hodoka's throwing his life away because of a girl and, how he kind of envies him. And I think that's, it's pretty clear that the movie at that point is kind of commenting on this kind of like reckless love that you get into when you're younger. And it's all compounded with the way the movie ends, where we find out over the course of the film that the only way to stop the rain is by Hina sacrificing herself. So Hina basically has to die to stop the rain. And then Hodoka basically says, fuck that. I don't want you to die. I'd rather live in this fucked up world where it's raining all the time than not have you. It's almost like that idea that Harlan Ellison was exploring in the original ending of City on the Edge of Forever. The idea of, I love you so much, I would rather live in a fucked up world that has you in it than live in a perfect world where you're missing. If you want to view the film through this lens, it's basically Hodoka damning the world so he could be with the girl he loves. If you want to say he's throwing his life away, it's almost this reckless relationship. I think that's one way you could look at the movie, and I think some people might be tempted to look at the film that way. But I actually think Weathering with You is more a movie about accepting somebody's baggage. When we realize that the only way to stop the rain is by sacrificing Hina, and Hodoka refuses to do that, you could actually look at the rain. Going back to the idea of the rain representing the misery in your life. You can look at the rain as representing baggage. Interestingly enough, the rain starts when Hina's mother is dying in the hospital. These ideas are very much linked together. So you could very much look at the rain in this story as a metaphor for the baggage Hina carries throughout her life. And when she's using her Sunshine Girl powers, she's kind of pushing away that baggage and being the perfect girl she thinks people expect her to be. And then at the end of the story, Hodoka says, fuck that. You don't need to be the Sunshine Girl. You don't need to be this perfect person. I'll accept you for who you are. Baggage and all. And I think that's what the movie is about. And I feel like that idea is reaffirmed with Taki's grandmother. What I didn't mention is that Taki from Your Name, his grandmother appears in this film. Taki and Mitsuha both have cameos, but Taki's grandmother appears in this film. And she's an important character in the sense that when Hodoka saves Hina from being sacrificed, the rain continues and it rains so hard that it floods Tokyo. Tokyo basically kind of sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And there's a scene where Hodoka meets up with Taki's grandmother and she says something to the effect of 200 years ago when Tokyo was Edo, it was underwater. And all that's happened right now is things have just kind of gone back to the way they were. When you look at the movie as this metaphor of accepting accepting somebody's flaws. I feel like Taki's grandmother is kind of reaffirming that idea by basically saying, there's no reason to be upset over the state of the world because the world is just going back to the way it used to be. We should just accept the world for what it is. And once again, it's this idea of accepting yourself for who you are. And, you shouldn't be ashamed of accepting your flaws because you're just being who you are. That's who you are, and that's who you've always been. Like Your Name, this movie has some pretty powerful scenes where Your Name had the sunset scene. The best scene in Weathering with You is the falling scene. The scene where Hodoka goes to the sky world to find Hina, and then they start falling and they start trying to catch each other. And this to me is the proof that Shinkai is an amazing director. Because when you look at the scene, this scene is basically the entire thesis of their relationship. Hodoka and Hina are falling, trying to hang on to each other. They're trying to get stability. Their entire relationship is encapsulated in this fall. They are living through chaos. They are falling and chaotically trying to grab onto each other. And then finally, when they're able to hold on to each other, they stabilize and the falling stops and they start to descend slowly. And the fucking music is playing and it's awesome. And it's just like that sunset scene. It encapsulates that idea of living a chaotic life and having a life that's in turmoil and then finding that person who stabilizes you and brings calmness to all the craziness that's going on around you. This is what a great filmmaker does. I mean, this is why, Shinkai's work, especially something like Your Name, in my opinion, should be held in such high regard because he is representing these honest moments in our lives and he's representing these moments everybody can relate to and he's doing it in a beautifully artistic manner that works as great literal storytelling, but it works even better as a metaphor. But with that said, there are a lot of interesting ideas in Weathering with You. I think that scene is really great, but I think ultimately I was disappointed with Weathering with You. Even though that falling scene is great, it's just as powerful as the sunset scene in Your Name. The problem with that scene is that it feels unearned because I feel like the love story in Weathering with You is kind of underdeveloped. It actually feels very one-sided, to tell you the truth, and it's probably because Your Name was switching back and forth between Taki and Mitsuha, whereas Weathering with You is much more told from Hodoka's perspective. I never really got the feeling Hina was really into Hodoka. The love story felt kind of fucking one-sided. I mean, I honestly, at the end of the movie where Hodoka meets up with Hina again, I fully expected Hina to say to Hodoka, "Oh, hey Hodoka, it's so great to see you again. Here's my boyfriend." Like the entire movie, it feels like Hodoka is getting friend-zoned. The love story, I feel like, was very underdeveloped by virtue of the fact that it was very one-sided. And that entire epilogue that happens at the end of the movie where Hodoka and Hina are separated, that to me felt like they were trying to hit the beats of Your Name. It seemed like, they had a formula in Your Name that worked, where they had these two characters that loved each other and they were together and then they were separated, then they needed to find each other again, and it felt like they were trying to stick to that formula, and it was like, okay, we have to have a scene where these characters fucking separate and they come back. The last 10 minutes of this movie was completely unnecessary. It should have just ended with Hodoka saving Hina. We didn't need this epilogue 3 years later. I also thought that whole subplot with the police trying to find Hodoka, that seemed kind of unnecessary. And then that police standoff where Hodoka's pointing the gun at Sugi, I didn't think that shit worked at all. I actually thought it made Hodoka kind of look like a psycho. It made him look like a nut job. It kind of made him seem unlikable, where the whole movie you're on his side. In that scene, he seems kind of like an unstable mess. All in all, the movie just feels very sloppy. I think it's a solid idea that is poorly executed, partly in part because it's trying to fit into the Your Name formula. This is not Your Name. And even though it's the same creative team and there are a lot of the same beats, it's a different movie. It's about a very different idea than Your Name. And I don't think they should have force this film into the template of Your Name. The influence of Your Name is all over this movie. I mean, clearly they had a much bigger budget because this movie looks awesome. The way Tokyo is presented in this movie is one of the best portrayals of Tokyo since Akira. Tokyo comes alive in this film. Tokyo very much is a character in this movie, the same way the weather is a character in this movie. You could even take this movie and we can take Tokyo to be a stand-in for Hodoka. We can take the rain to be a stand-in for Hina, and the relationship between Tokyo and the Rain, and the relationship between Hodaka and Hina parallel each other. And I think that stuff works very well, and I wish they would have focused on that rather than try to force this into the Your Name template and bring in these kind of weird ancillary side plots. Like I said, I think the whole thing with the cops was unnecessary. The one character I wish there was more of was Natsumi. Natsumi is my favorite character in this film. I needed more fucking Natsumi. I really wish they would make a Natsumi spin-off series. I think that would be fucking awesome. It would basically be about Natsumi. She would work for Sugi's magazine, and then she would like investigate paranormal mysteries, you know, like for stories in the magazine. It would be fucking awesome. She could drive around in her little moped reporting on these like supernatural events. That would fucking rule. I want a fucking Natsumi spin-off series, goddammit. She's awesome. You can never do wrong with more Natsumi in your life. I also feel like the mythology of the film isn't really clearly defined. The film basically says the only way to stop the rain is if Hina is sacrificed. But then the movie also implies that Hina using her Sunshine Girl powers is also killing her. So it seemed kind of confusing. It's like, well, which is it? Does she need to be sacrificed, or is the Sunshine Girl powers killing her? And then why does it stop? She basically goes and gets absorbed into like the sky world, and then, you know, there are all these like weird floating, you know, water sperm fish things floating around her, and I guess that cured her and she was able to go back, so she didn't have to be sacrificed. She just needed to live in the sky world. I mean, the mythology really doesn't seem like it's really clearly defined. I read that it was based off of a lot of Shinto mythology, so maybe if you're familiar with like the teachings of Shintoism, it makes sense to you and you could kind of fill in the gaps, but I didn't understand it. I thought that whole sky world was really awesome with like, you know, the dragon and the whale and shit. Like all that shit was really awesome, and I wish they spent more time exploring it. That is really where the film should have focused its efforts instead of with the fucking police subplot. We could have had more exposition dealing with what is going on in the sky world and what exactly is the role of the Sunshine Girl. And then there's even this idea that like early in the film when Natsumi and Hodaka are talking to the fortune teller, she says, you know, not only are there Sunshine Girls, but there are Rain Girls. So I thought that the movie was going to reveal there was a Rain Girl that was causing all the rain, and then there was going to be this kind of standoff between Hina and the Rain Girl, but there's no fucking Rain Girl. Like, okay, why did you tease that idea and then not deliver it? That is something that should be addressed in the Natsumi spin-off series. The first arc of the Natsumi spin-off series should be dealing with the Rain Girl. You know, like she would be the first villain of the series. Overall, I think Weathering with You is a swing and a miss. But with that said, it's not a bad movie. I think the characters are all very likable, and there definitely is a lot to engage with. I just don't feel like it comes together as a completely cohesive unit. So I think that's it. I think that's all I got to say about Weathering with You. Before I leave you today, I just want to mention that I'm available for art commissions. I do art commissions. If you want original characters, if you want fan art, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. Feel free to send me an email. My contact information is in the description of this video. My rates are very reasonable, and I'd be happy to draw anything that you like. And if you enjoy the Studio Chojin videos and you want to support the channel, I have a Ko-fi account that you can donate anything you like, and you can always support the channel by liking the video, leaving a comment, sharing the video, tell your friends. However you want to support the channel is greatly appreciated. So, with all that said, this is Reverend Paul saying, until we meet again.